Hey, welcome to the Beware the Moon podcast. My name is Hannah, and today we're going to be talking about Bird Box, which came out in 2018 on Netflix. I remember there was a lot of hype around this movie. I don't have Netflix, so I didn't get to watch it, but I remember Bird Box challenges and all kinds of weird stuff going on. Everybody was talking about it and I just couldn't shut up about it. And then I just recently saw it a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This movie is really, really good. As always, I do my spoiler-free review first, and then I will get into spoilers in a second. Also, if you hear any cats yelling in the background, I apologize. I'm house sitting at the moment, so if the recording sounds different, that's also why. But this movie is really, really good. We've got a lot of hard-hitting actors and actresses in this one. Sandra Bullock is one of the stars. Sarah Paulson, who you might know from American Horror Story and Run. John Malkovich, who is just the John Malkovich. Like, if you don't know him, wow. Then we also have B.D. Wong, who is the scientist from Jurassic World who's always fucking things up. And we also have Machine Gun Kelly for some reason in this movie. I did not recognize him because I think I know one Machine Gun Kelly song, and I think he looks like a weasel fucker. So he looks gross to me. Kind of like a white kid pretending to be a gangster. He reminds me of, maybe that's harsh, but he reminds me of my sister's ex, who was a drug dealer and also a piece of shit. So, that was my only impression when I saw him in this movie. And that's kind of the character he plays, is a drug addict piece of shit. So, anyway, he's in this movie, which is super fucking random. And then, the other thing I have to say about this movie is that it has great characters, great character intros, and it is not a time waster. Like, we don't have dialogue in this movie that doesn't serve a purpose. Like, every bit of dialogue is character building or mood building, atmosphere building. It's building a reality, which I think is very important in movies, and it's not doing it boringly, like, what's your name? Where do you live? It's like, you just see where people are at, and I think that that's really good. This movie is really great at showing and not telling. Like, there's a scene where John Malkovich and Sandra Bullock get closer together, and instead of being like, we have friends now, it just kind of lets you assume that that's what happens. So it's really good at that, and I really appreciate that. Not a lot of movies do that. It doesn't hold your hand and walk you through everything, which is great. It's very tense at moments, and you definitely feel for these characters. They all become very real to you, which I think is important in a movie, any movie, but especially a horror movie. Because, I mean, this type of horror movie, anyhow, it's very important. It's things like Friday the 13th, you're like, get up, Jason, but like this type of horror movie, you really need to feel for the characters in order for it to pack a punch. And this movie does that very well. I will also say that it doesn't explain everything. So if you're someone who you need answers, this is not the movie for you, because it doesn't give you those. I'm one of those people that I'm like, you don't need to explain every little thing. I don't really care. That's not really the focus of this movie. We're not like in I Am Legend, where we're like a scientist trying to figure out a cure. Like, we're just trying to survive. So we don't need to know everything. We just need to know what we need to know in order to survive. And they give you that much. There's no big reveal of the monsters, which I think is better than having a big reveal of the monsters, because I don't think there are very few monsters that I've seen on screen that live up to expectation. And this, I don't think they would have been able to bring you something that lives up to expectation. So I like that they don't, pan out and show these creatures whatever they are. They just kind of keep it mysterious. And it works really, really well. So That's my unspoilery review. So if you want to go watch it, I highly recommend it. It's a good watch if you're looking for something um, that is intense, but not too tense to the point where you're like freaking out the rest of the night. You know, it's scary, but it's not like horrifying. There's no gore really, but it is still it's a really good movie. So for the spoiler part, I'll let you know we start off with a voice on the radio, and it's this guy saying, "We've got a safe place. You know, you got to come down the river. You know, they can't get to us in here." And he's like, "Do you have kids?" And kids won't make it because of the rapids. So it's kind of a one-sided conversation that we hear via the radio. And then we see Sandra Bullock, and she's going like full drill sergeant supreme on these two kids. She's like, do not take off your blindfolds. Don't do this. Don't do that. If you do, you will die. Do you understand? And they're just like, you know, kind of. And she calls them boy and girl, which is the funniest thing to me ever. So, that's kind of their names. I was like, you gotta be fucking with me. Nope, that is their names. And she explains to them, like, if you take off your blindfold, you will die. So we're getting some of the backstory a little bit here. We're getting some of the rules of this survival apocalyptic world. And it's not much to go off of, but, you know, we understand why they're blindfolded, why they're walking around. Then she's got these little burbs in a cage. Yes, she does. Cats are protesting. Oh my gosh, guys, don't fight. Anyway, the burbs, she puts the burbs in a box. Haha, that's the movie's name. The birds are in a box. We did it, guys. We made it. And I just noticed that, like, Sandra Bullock is so, like, precise in this moment. Like, it's impressive. Like, she grabs the kids, puts the birds in this box. You know, she's got holes in the box so the birds can breathe. And she's got the kids, and she's got this line, and she's counting out her steps. She's counting out this and counting out that, counting out the stairs. It's very impressive. And, that she gets to the riverside, flips the boat over, gets the kids in the boat. All very impressive, because she's doing it, like I said, blindfolded. Everyone's blindfolded. And I thought at this point, like, that's kind of weird that they're all blindfolded, because I'm pretty sure this is around the time A Quiet Place came out, and I looked it up. Yeah, Quiet Place also came out in 2018, so we had two movies that kind of play off of disabilities. You know, the Quiet Place, you can't speak, and in this one, you can't see. So I think that's pretty intense. I know Hush also came out probably around this time. Sorry, I just thought of that, or else I'd have the date. But Hush also came out around this time, and that one, I believe the lady is mute and deaf. So we don't really, I think normal people don't really think about that and how terrifying that is, which is why the Bird Box Challenge existed. You kind of were doing the Bird Box thing. You put a blindfold on and see how well you can move around and do things. Not as well as Sandra Bullock, I can promise you that. So at this point in the movie, we get the kids in the boat, we get the boat on the river, and Sandra Bullock is rowing this thing, and we are going down the river absolutely blind, which is great. It's exactly what you want to be doing. And then we get like a title card that's like 5 years earlier. Not like the movie title card. It's just like a, you know, screen 5 years earlier, which is great. So we get to see the buildup of what's going on. So at this point, Sandra Bullock, her name is Mallory. She's in her own apartment. She's painting, and her ego is super prego. She's got like a bowling ball in her stomach. And Sarah Paulson shows up, which is super exciting. I do like Sarah Paulson's acting. She can be very sweet and timid and also intimidating. And in this movie, she is witty and sweet, and I just love her scenes. Especially right here, we get a lot of great character moments, and we get a lot of plot that's sort of inserted into the conversation seamlessly. So if you're not paying attention and you're like on your phone or, you know, got your finger in your butt or whatever, you're going to miss it. But like they have little slots where they just kind of hash out who they are as people. Sarah Paulson says, your roommate Ryan, and she goes, Ryan wasn't just a roommate, and she's like, well, as it turns out, he kind of was. So we assume Ryan's the father of the child, whoever he is. We assume that he vamoosed and wants nothing to do with Mallory anymore or the child. We get from their bits of dialogue that Mallory's got some attachment issues. The sisters have had family problems. Like I said, the dad of the baby's out of the picture. Just a lot of good beats. We also we get the feeling that there's something going on, some kind of pandemic happening, but it's happening in Russia. So, whatever, we're probably safe. At that point, they're talking, and Sarah Paulson, the sister, she's like, hey, I'm going to go look at this Arabian stud, she's talking about a horse, all right? I want to make that very clear. She's talking about a horse. And she's like, do you want to go with me? And Mallory's like, well, I've got my last OBGYN appointment. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going with you. And she's like, you don't have to do that. I can cancel the appointment. We can go look at an Arabian stud. And she's like, no, we're going to the hospital. We're going to see your doctor. So sister takes her. They're at the hospital. And we see this lady in a tracksuit, a red tracksuit, as we're going through the hospital. And we kind of like slow pan on her. So she stands out. Not sure why yet, but she's standing out to us. So then we're at the OBGYN appointment. She's showing everybody, she's doing an ultrasound of the baby, so showing them the baby. And I love this doctor. She is so funny. The moments with this doctor, they're just great. Like, the dialogue is funny and witty, and they have a good banter. Like, if I had a doctor with this kind of bedside manner, I would just feel way more at ease. She's super great. And Mallory is calling the baby a little bean, and she's like, well, you might want to rephrase that because it's the size of a watermelon now. And she's like, what are you going to name it? And she's like, I don't know. And so she's like, a problem is a problem. You can't just ignore it and hope it goes away. Like, it doesn't work like that. This is not just a problem. This is a baby. You need to think about what you want to do. And this is the moment where I, like, double down on my love for this doctor, because instead of handing her pamphlets with, Planned Parenthood, yada yada, she hands her an adoption pamphlet. And people were like, oh, this movie is pro-life and against choice, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, maybe it is. But I personally appreciate that. I personally don't believe that abortion should be used as birth control. It's not healthy for a woman's body to just be doing that all the time. I mean, if you made your choice to have sex, and in this case, Mallory seems to have made a conscious decision to have sex, that is one of the consequences of having sex. Like, you don't decide to bake a cake and then you accidentally get pregnant, or you don't decide to go do your taxes and you accidentally end up pregnant. Like, you only, like, if you're making conscious decisions, like, I'm going to go sleep with this man, and you end up pregnant, that's a consequence of your action, right? Like, it's not like you didn't know that could happen. With cases like rape and, where the mother's life is in danger, I think those are a little bit different. I still, with rape, would rather people go with adoption. But, I mean, at the same time, she didn't make the decision. Someone else made that decision for her, and I think she should, without judgment, be able to make a decision. I don't think I would make that decision, and I'm not saying that shooting in the dark. So don't at me on that. But this isn't the focus of that movie. It's just a moment that I appreciate. And it's a very quick moment, too, because after we have that, she just looks at the adoption pamphlet, and then all of a sudden we hear, like, vomiting. And this is when, like, I really love the sisters, because Mallory's vomiting, and her sister is like, are you in there vomiting? And she's like, no. And she's like, is it the chunky kind? And she's like, no, it's the smooth kind that comes out really quick and easy. And you're like, why would you even ask that question? They have such a weird sibling relationship, and I fucking love it. It's like every sibling relationship, like, you just ask your sibling weird questions. That's just how you do it. So she's like, go get the car, I'll be out in a second. And so Mallory is leaving, and of course we see the tracksuit lady again, except this time she is slamming her head into the fucking window, the glass. And it is gnarly. Like, it's not just like bam, bam, it's like bam, bam. And we see like the glass start to spider web, and we see blood everywhere, and she like looks Mallory in the face with blood coming off of her forehead, and then just starts going for it again. And you're like, what the fuck? And of course Mallory's like, we gone, we're out ski, we're leaving, GTFO y'all, bye, Felicia, peacing out, sphinctering out, as we say on Sophomore John's podcast, or Sophomore John's stream, rather, when we're playing Alien Isolation specifically, we're sphinctering out, we're getting out of there. Whatever is happening in Russia, Mallory says, it's happening here now, so we gotta go. And, so the sister's like, you're gonna come with me to my ranch, and we're gonna lay low until this thing is over. And she's like, no, I want to go back to my apartment. And she's like, no, you have nothing in your apartment. I literally had to go get you groceries. Like, no, we're not doing that. You're gonna come out to my ranch. And she's like, what am I gonna wear? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you're focusing on all the wrong things. And Valerie's like, I find it comforting to focus on the wrong things. And I was like, damn, if that's not relatable, I don't even know what is. I felt her on that one. So, sister is driving them out of there. And shit is happening. Like, people are crashing their vehicles. People are jumping in front of it. Like, it is just bonanza. Like, everything is balls to the walls insane. And a phone starts ringing, and Mallory's like, it's not me. And she's like, oh, my phone is in the back. So Mallory turns around, which is a very important detail, and is fishing around for the sister's phone. And the sister, I love the effects in this movie, what they do with the eyes. Because the sister is staring forward, driving, sees something, her eyes change color, she starts, like, crying, and then immediately starts trying to wreck them. And, of course, Mallory is like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? And they're fighting for the wheel, and the car flips, and they're crawling out from underneath it. Luckily, they're able to. I say luckily, not really for the sister, because holy shit, bye-bye Sarah Paulson. She she's staring her sister, who's on the ground, in the face, and then Sarah Paulson just steps backward in front of a dump truck and just gets splatted. It is a very good kill, and it's super freaky. I give it a 10 out of 10. It's the most surprising kill in this movie, especially your first watch around, you're like, what the hell is happening? What is going on? And then Sarah Paulson just kills herself, and you're like, holy shit. So, everything's blowing up. People are crashing. Mallory is riding the struggle bus because she's pregnant. She just got into a car wreck. She's trying to get somewhere safe. This is clearly not, her part of town, and she's just, like I said, on the struggle bus. And she sees John Malkovich and his wife, and she stops. She's like, oh my goodness, she's pregnant. And he's like, leave her, like, he's like major dick vibes. He's like, who cares? Don't give a fuck. We gotta escape. But that doesn't stop her. She goes over to Mallory and starts talking to her and is like gonna help her. But then she looks up and sees something and she goes, Mom, don't go. And then she sits her ass down in a flaming car. And it's flaming, like we can see her silhouette in this car. She's on fire, and then the car explodes with her in it. And you're like, holy titties. This movie is insane already. So Mallory is on the ground. She's saved by this dashing fella who tells her to keep her eyes down, don't look. He helps her up. They're running towards this house that John Malkovich just escaped into. And they're pounding on the door, and John Malkovich is like, don't let them in. And B.D. Wong is like, this is my house, and I'll do what I want, bitch. So he lets them in. And John's not happy with Mallory, but the owner of the house, who we've come to find out is named Greg, it's B.D. Wong, he is not him, and he's like, no, you guys are okay, you can come in, you can stay as long as you need. And there's more people in the house, and everybody just kind of starts rambling about what is going on. I said that just like Kristen Stewart did in Twilight, but whatever. They're talking about what and why is going on. Different things that they've heard, that they've seen. And Tom is like, if you see whatever it is, you die. And John Malkovich is like, no, you start trying to kill yourself until you die. And that's kind of what we've seen happen, is people just start trying to kill themselves, and they go at it until they accomplish it, which is super fucking freaky and a really cool plot, plot. Just awesome. Everybody, like I said, though, everybody's kind of like freaked out about what's going on. This is where we meet the rest of the cast of characters for the majority of the movie, aside from boy and girl, of course, because they're little babies. They're like 5. Wonder why we went back 5 years. But we have, like, we've got Machine Gun Kelly, whose name is Felix, who's basically a trashy, junky looking dude. And then we've got a girl from the police academy. We've got Douglas, who is John Malkovich. We have Greg, who's BD Wong. We've got Tom, and Tom is the guy who saved Mallory. We've got Mallory, and we've got this little old lady. I never catch her name. And then, who else do we have? Charlie, a guy named Charlie, who works at the supermarket. And I think that's it for now. So, Mallory, she's freaking out. They're trying to watch the news. The news cuts off. And on the news channel, we see a horse running from the police. And, of course, that sets Mallory off, starts crying again. And Tom notices this. He goes to comfort her a little bit, which she's, like, not having it, man. But they have, like, a really cute moment. And then we kind of cut to the present, and it tells us how long they've been on the river. So they've been 6 hours on the river now. And boy and girl are cuddled up under a blanket, just sleeping, which is super, super cute. Mallory is caring for her birds, her little burbies, and she tries the radio, but she gets nothing back, And then the birds start yakking, and Mallory goes on full alert. So clearly these birds have some kind of instinct that Mallory finds useful. So, back in the past, we talk about food and rations, and Douglas, who is John Malkovich, is being pissy about Mallory being pregnant. He's like, some of us don't know what rationing means. And I was like, wow, guy, maybe calm your titties. And Tom is looking like he's thinking the same thing. And then we get a knock on the door. And there's a lady on the other side. She's like, help me, blah, blah, blah. And of course, John Malkovich, Douglas is like, no, we're not doing that. Like, it's bad enough that we've got this many people and our rations are running low. We're not helping someone else. And he goes to get the gun, but Mallory's like, psych, it's mine, bitch. So she's holding Douglas at gunpoint. And Tom's talking to whoever's through the door. It's a lady. And he says, hey, I need you to take this blanket, put it up across those lanterns, and then I'm going to open the door for you, which is great. And he has everyone look away, which is great. Tom is, like, very much taking care of everybody. So he opens the door, and this lady comes in, and she says her name is Olympia. I thought she said Olivia. I was wrong. It's Olympia, which is a dope-ass name. And she is also preggo. And she is due close to Mallory. So that's weird and not coincidental at all. She said she left home hoping to find food because she was running out. She didn't want her baby to starve. And John Malkovich, Douglas, is not happy. He was already pissed off about the one pregnant lady they let in. And now they have 2. And he makes a comment like, great, now we have 2. But Greg has an idea. He says, what if we don't look at them directly? We have cameras all around the house. So maybe if we look at them through the cameras, we, A, won't be completely blind, and B, might be safe. And everybody's kind of like mixed feelings on it. Douglas is like, this is a bad idea. You should not do this. But Greg is like, I think it's worth a try. And he volunteers as tribute. So they tie him down to, like an office chair. And as they're doing that, he's got his computer screens up, all the cameras up, and Greg and Douglas have a moment excuse me, where Douglas gives as heartfelt a goodbye as he can. It seems that, so at the beginning of this mess in the house, sorry, I was just tapping on this dog's ear, my bad. At the beginning of their tenure in the house, Douglas and Greg clearly have beef because Douglas is suing Greg and their neighbors. And he's suing him for a house renovation. And when Mallory says, you know, like, why are you suing him? And he says, because I have to look at them. Because he wants to build, Greg's husband wants to build a glass monstrosity, he calls it. So he had told Greg, you know, that's not why I was suing you guys, but clearly it was. Which, I mean, married people are going to do what married people are going to do. Just talking in general, personally, if I were Douglas, I wouldn't want them to build a big glass room either, facing my house. But that's regardless of their sexual orientation. I don't, like, personally, I know I walk around my house in the nude, so, like, I assume other people do it, and I'm not interested in seeing you, whoever you are, neighbor, walking around your house nude. But anyway, so I kind of get that, kind of don't. You know, the reason is a little iffy, but, like, I do get it at the same time. Like, I wouldn't want to be seeing my neighbors being all together and lovey-dovey. Like, that to me is just weird. Especially if you don't know your neighbors. Like, that would be super fucking weird. We had, this is random, we had a patch of woods across the street from my house growing up that we had to be careful going into because an elderly couple owned that property and they would just walk through the woods naked. So definitely not about seeing my neighbors naked. Maybe that just scarred me for life. I don't know. But anyway, Academy Girl and Machine Gun Kelly, they have a tiny moment where Academy Girl's stretching and he's checking her out. She's like, not in your dreams, bro. And he's like, it's the end of the world. You never know. And then we see Douglas drinking, but he's rationing it really, really well. And after hours and hours of looking at these screens, Greg finally sees it. And he starts freaking out. Everybody hears it. A bunch of people go rushing upstairs to help Greg. And Tom warns everyone to look away fast. They smash the monitor, but it's too late. Greg has unalived himself. He flips his chair to the side and slams his head into a brick fixture on the ground. It's like part of a chimney, I think. Academy Girl is freaking out, so Machine Gun Kelly like ushers her out of the room, which for all of her pretending to be tough, Academy Girl is a big sissy. Later, Olympia invades Mallory's space, and she does it in a really sweet way. Like, she reminds me of the big kid. She seems very emotionally needy and immature, but like I said, very sweet. She explains later, you know, everyone's done everything for me. You know, I'm not tough like you are, Mallory, which we'll get to that part, but she is a very soft person as far as her spirit. And I think that that's really cute. She accidentally hits a hot button topic, though, with Mallory. So Mallory goes downstairs. She's asking about the baby and the husband, and her husband. She's like, I don't have a husband. The dad's not in the picture. And then she asks about her family. And of course, with her sister, who is basically her only family, having just unalived herself in front of a dump truck, she goes downstairs. So she hears something as she's like chilling downstairs, and she opens the door and finds Machine Gun Kelly and Academy Girl fucking. And she's like, oops, sorry, and closes the door. And Tom's like, that's not something you can unsee. And they start cracking jokes and they have a cute little moment. And then it's river time again. We have been on this river for 14 hours. And they're going down the way and they hear someone calling out to them. He's like, it's okay to take off the blindfolds. And Mallory's like, no, do not take off your blindfolds. She gets her gun out. This guy is insistent. Like, he's like, you know, everything's fine. You'll be okay. You'll be better off without your blindfolds. So she grabs her gun and starts just shooting blind at this guy. And he's cray-cray. Pretty obvious right away. He takes the gun from her. But then she chops the fuck out of him with a machete, and honestly, good for her. Like, here's the thing. If you're really someone trying to help, you're like, whoa, don't shoot. Like, I'll back off. This guy is obviously crazy because he's like, no, it's fine. Everything's okay. Like, no, normal people don't have that reaction when someone starts shooting at you. Someone starts shooting at you, you're like, fuck it, they're on their own. Like, you don't just keep going for them. But she chops him, and he's like, everyone must see. And then he falls into the river. And then we go back to the past, and they decide, this part of the past, they decide to go on a food run. And everybody's like, how in God's name are we going to do that? And Tom is a brilliant, wonderful man. Love him. He says, we can black out the car's windows and just use the GPS. So they paint the windows, and they put up newspapers. And Charlie, who is kind of a minor character, he explains to them that he had locked up the superstore he works at before everything kind of hit the fan. So that's why they're like, oh, we're going there, we're gonna do this, and they decide who's going, and it's gonna be Douglas, Academy Girl, Charlie, Mallory, because she said, fuck it, I'm the best, and she really is, and Tom. So they use the GPS and the sensors in the vehicle to tell where they're going and if they're about to hit something. So they go super slow. Super, super slow. And it'll be like, beep, beep, beep. And they're like, okay, turn a little bit. Do this, do that, And this kind of highlights Tom's role as the emotional anchor for the group, because they do run over some dead bodies, and Tom is like, it's okay, it's just a speed bump. And they run over some actual speed bumps, and he's like, it's okay, it's just a speed bump. They're running over more bodies. And it's got some good tense moments here. The car gets surrounded by whatever these creatures are, and they have to like gun it in reverse and then gun it forward, and then they're like doing all kinds of crazy stuff to try and avoid them, and somehow they make it to El Supermercado. So they get inside. Of course, they have like little blindfolds, they have goggles that are blacked out, and blindfolds, all kinds of cool stuff. And they get in, and everybody immediately splits up to find different stuff. Tom reminds them, hey, we need non-perishable goods. Leave the perishable stuff. We only have a limited amount of room in the car. Grab things that are non-perishable. Academy Girl runs off to go get some junk food for the moment. Mallory runs off to go get something. And then Douglas is like, where's the booze? My man. So he runs off to go drink. And Tom and Mallory, they have a moment which is really, really cute. Tom kind of explains his backstory a little bit. He's got a sister who's on her 4th kid. And he's like, I just love her kids. And he's like, she used to let me touch her belly. And Mallory's like, I know that game. We're not doing that. Like, no. Because he's clearly like, he's also kind of hitting on her. He gets her like diapers. He's like, this is my baby shower gift to you. But it's really cute moment. And then, and Tom, he takes it really well. And Mallory is kind of into him. So she also doesn't give him like a firm, hardcore, hell no rejection, which is good because he is the man. So they're still in the supermarket. Mallory goes and she finds the Burbs. There's like a little cage of them. And she's like, how did you guys get so lucky? And this is probably my biggest issue with this movie as far as logic and reasoning. Because what supermarket just has like parakeets in the fucking supermarket? I've never in my life seen that. Like, why is there just like little parakeets in this supermarket? And then it's also been quite a few days. So like, how are they alive still? They probably did not have that much food and water in their cage when everything hit the fan. So like, how are they still alive? I don't know, man. I don't know. Guess it's not that important. The movie's good anyway. Regardless of bird life and death and logical bird lifespans and, I don't even know, bird needs. So, drunk Douglas is, like, calling for everyone to come to his aisle. And he's like, we are making the apocalypse great again. And they're like, okay, whatever, Douglas. And, of course, he's like, don't you guys get it? We could just stay here in the store. And he's like, there's no logical there's no logical explanation to go back. And there's no legal argument for it. And Mallory's like, how about because we're not assholes? Like, there are other people who are hungry. So, as she says that, there's kind of like knocking on a door, and they're like, what the fuck? So, this door that's being knocked on, they're like, what's behind here, Charlie? And he's like, the loading dock. And this guy is talking, and Charlie recognizes him as Fish Fingers, and he's like, he did some time, but he's always been nice to me. And he's like, how'd you get out there? And he's like, some people pushed me out here, they tricked me. You gotta help me out, you gotta let me in. And Tom was like in the process of opening it, and then the birds start freaking out, so they're about to close the door again, and then Fish Fingers loses it, and he is a big, strong guy, and he's pushing in and pushing in and pushing in, and everyone's freaking out, including Charlie. And Charlie, like a boss, just charges at Fish Fingers and tackles him out of the doorway so that they can close the door. And they're like, Charlie, Charlie! But we hear Fish Fingers say, everyone must see, and then we hear a stabby stab sound, and then there's blood pooling under the door. And we can still hear Fish Fingers, so clearly it was Charlie. And this easily shuts down the argument for staying in the store. Everybody leaves. And then back at the house, they're bringing in the groceries, and they're like, where's Charlie? And Douglas makes some stupid-ass comment about the book Charlie was writing, and Mallory's like, he saved us, you fucking asshole. So that night, John and Mallory kind of have a moment of understanding that's really great. He talks about how, his first wife, when she divorced him, said, to call him a creep would be an affront to creeps everywhere. His second wife basically said the same thing, and he's like, my third wife, she really was, third time really was the charm for me. My third wife, she was the kindest woman I ever knew, blah, blah, blah. And Mallory's like, you kind of remind me of my dad. And he's like, oh, a man who dispenses wisdom. And she's like, yeah, an asshole who blames everything on everyone else, even though he treats people like shit. And he takes it really well. And she's like, but you look different than him. He's like, do I also look like him? And she's like, nah, you don't. And he's like, what's different? And she's like, the hair is different because John Malkovich is bald. So he gives her like a little shot of whiskey, and they have a shot of whiskey together, so they come to a good understanding. And then they hear something, and it's Machine Gun Kelly and Academy Girl, and they're leaving in the car, those fuckers. And of course everybody's pissed and disappointed, and I'm like, what a piece of shit. This is why I think Academy Girl is actually a big sissy. And also, I like to think that they probably betray each other somewhere down the line, like one of them gets into a tight spot and the other just abandons them. That's what I think happened, because they're both weaselly bastard pieces of shit. Then it's more river time, and we have been on the river a full 24 hours. How are they peeing? Are they just peeing in their pants? I don't know. I don't think I want to know. As they're going, they hit a bump, and then they hit a semi-truck that has been lodged in the water. Clearly someone just drove it off some cliff or something and into the river. And they hit it, and everybody kind of topples, and Boy falls overboard with the supplies. And of course we save Boy, and Mallory's gonna go give him a blanket because he's cold, it's freezing, and there is no blankets. There are no food, everything is fucked. So he just starts apologizing, and it makes me big sad. He's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, it's not your fault. And I was like, yeah, it's not your fault, my guy. So Mallory can hear something, and she steers the boat to shore to go look for supplies. And she tells the kids, do not leave the boat, because of course she's looking out for their safety. And Mallory has this really cool system of like a fishing line, so she just unravels it as she walks, so she knows where she's been and how to get back to the boat. Really genius. She finds a bunker and starts looting it, takes off her blindfold, starts looking for supplies, gets stuff that they need. And something goes wrong. She can hear and sense something, and it's the creatures. So she puts her blindfold on, she's leaving again, and she starts like shooting. She falls over and starts shooting randomly. And I love the random dead body we get in the shot. But back at the boat, the girls says, something is wrong with Mallory. And then she ties a rope to her waist and ties the rope to the boat, and then goes to investigate, and she almost dies because she comes like right in front of one of the creatures, and she can kind of tell something's off, and it's standing right there. And there seems to be like an unspoken rule that these creatures cannot make you look at them. My theory is that they're incorporeal. For whatever reason, they're not physical the way we are physical. And Charlie had talked about their spirits that descend upon humanity to judge them. If they're found wanting, then they show you your worst nightmares, which kind of seems like the deal here, you know, and he's talking about different entities like Fuka and, you know, different, and that is not a veiled swear, guys. I'll swear if I want to swear, okay? A Fuka is an actual thing. But he's talking about all these different entities and different religions and different cultures that kind of resemble somewhat these things. So, anyway, there's this unspoken rule. They can't make you look at them. So, luckily, even though she's right in front of one, she doesn't take off her blindfold, and she gets yanked back. And turns out Mallory is reeling her in like she's a fish. And Mallory puts her back in the boat, and she gives girl an intense talk. Like, you never ever do that. Do not ever do that again. And she's like, you know, if something is wrong, you save yourself. You don't ever come looking for me. You save yourself. And she's like, you say it, say it, say it. And she's like, I saved myself. And she's crying. And she just wanted to be helpful. Poor little girl. You know, like, Mallory's her only adult, clearly. And she wanted to, I don't know, it's just so sad. So, anyway, in the past, Tom and Mal talk. And Tom talks about how he was stationed in Iraq. And he talks about how, because they're talking about, like, everything is fucked. Like, why are we trying to hold on to something normal? Why are we trying to stick together? Whatever. And he explains that when he was in Iraq, there was this guy walking down the road with these kids. And so they stopped to check it out. And it turns out it was a dad walking his kids to school. Even though everything was, like, a shitfest, he's just walking his kids to school in the midst of all the war going on. And so they escort him and his kids to the school and back, and he's like, and it just became a routine. And he's like, I like to think that the dad is still there walking his kids to school despite everything. And he shows the necklace that the dad gave him. And then Mallory really feels for him, so she lets him touch the belly. It's kind of like touching the butt, but not really. So that's super sweet. And then we go back to River. The river. We've been on the river 28 hours. So boy and girl are asleep again, and they're cuddling, and Mallory tries the radio, but it doesn't work. So we go back to the past. Same, but it's Olympia. Oh, same. Sorry, I'm reading my notes. So Mallory's trying to find someone on the radio. Cannot. And it's the middle of the night, and she can hear Olympia talking to someone. And she's at the door, and then she lets this someone in. And this guy, I don't like him immediately. There's something weird about him. And Douglas is also mad because it's Douglas. But I think at this point, honestly, Douglas is trying to protect the small group of people that have accepted him as he is. So he's like, new guy, it was nice meeting you, but get the fuck out. And Gary's like explaining his story. And he explains that there are crazy people out there who have seen, but they don't want to die. But they do want everyone else to see. So they're super, super cray-cray. Douglas does not like this story. It puts him even more on edge. And he has the gun. He's pointing it at Gary. And he's like, get out. I'm not going to say it again. And this is when the little old lady actually makes, like, an impact on this story. She knocks Douglas over the head with a vase. And then they drag him into the garage. And that's where Douglas is for now. So Mallory and Olympia talk again, and it's super cute, super sweet. And Olympia, this is the part where she's like, you know, I'm not tough like you, I'm soft. Everyone has done everything for me my whole life. And she kind of is just like verbally admiring Mallory, which is super cute. And then she says, you know, if something happens to me, I want you to take care of my baby. And Mallory's like, nothing is going to happen to you, you know. That's not going to happen. You're going to take care of your baby because nothing's going to happen to you. And she's like, no, please promise me. So she eventually does. And she gives her a small baby shower where she gives her like a Hello Kitty keychain or some shit like that. It's really kind of cute. And she's like, Olympia has this sweetest heart. She's crying and she's like, it's perfect. And you're like, what a good little lady. So we're on the river again, 38 hours. And they have a meeting. about the rapids. And this is the part that's threatening already to make me cry. My first watch through. So Mallory is explaining to them that the rapids are intense and they will not be able to make it through unless someone looks. And so she's like, one of you will have to look, because if I look, none of us are going to live. We're all going to die. So the little boy volunteers to look, and Mallory says, no, I say who looks. I say who looks. And this is the part where, this is where it really starts to threaten me, because girl clearly thinks it's going to be her, because it's, their whole lives, if you look, you die. If you look, you die. There is no, maybe you get 2 seconds. No, if you look, you die. So she's thinking Mallory's going to sacrifice her, which literally punches me in the stomach of emotions, and I just want to die thinking about that. Kids are definitely my biggest weakness, and especially, like, kids feeling loved. I just want them to feel loved. And it kind of reminds me of the story my teacher told in high school about this lady in Nazi Germany, and she had a boy and a girl, and a Nazi soldier said, you can take one of them, but not both of them. The other one I take with me, and if you don't choose one of them, I'll shoot all 3 of you. So the mom chooses to take the boy with her because she figures he has a better chance of survival. And in the end, both of the children die. But the mother is left wondering, would things have been different? And I remember just being gutted by that story. Like, if I were the mother, I'd probably want to die. So we asked my very wise English teacher, what would you have done? And she said, I wouldn't have chose between the kids. And we were all flabbergasted, because we were like, but then they both die. And she said, at least they know that I loved them and that I would not choose between them. I loved them equally with all of my life. And she said, it's not, if you're choosing between the two, the evil is on your head. Whatever happens is on your head. But if you're letting him make the decision, then it's on him. He's the one opting to shoot all 3 of you. He's the one pulling the trigger, not you. So I just kind of think that this is one of those moments where, whoever you choose is going to feel unloved. So I'm already, like, thinking about that. That's where I'm coming from. Tears are in my eyes, in my heart. And then we go back to the past, and everybody's kind of having a chill time. Sitting in the kitchen, listening to music, talking, and both of the ladies go into labor. So the little old lady is acting as their delivery nurse. She takes them both upstairs. Tom helps. She tells Tom to go get a bucket of water. Tom does that. And of course, Douglas is like, sees that something's going on, so he's standing by the door of the garage, which has a giant ass window. And he sees Gary start being weird, and Gary pulls these pictures out of his briefcase that are all fucked up and weird. And we're like, yep, Douglas was right this whole time. Gary should have been shot in the head. Gary should have been thrown to the wolves. And Douglas is like, what are you doing? And Gary puts the burbs in the freezer, which is super fucked up. So that way they don't make noise when he starts going crazy. And Douglas is like, what are you doing? So then he opens the garage door, and Douglas is like, you fucking asshole, we were nice to you. And I was like, yeah, Douglas, you tell that man. You're right for once. So then the ladies have their baby. Gary also knocks out Tom and then goes to see the ladies and their babies. And this is when we find out that boy is Mallory's and girl is Olympia's. And as they're sitting there, post-delivery, holding their children, Gary's like, they should look. And he just starts taking all the blinds and curtains down off the windows, and you're like, ah! And so Mallory is like, don't look. But it's too late for Olympia. Olympia is looking. And so Mallory puts boy down and gets up and is like, Olympia, let me see your baby. Let me see your baby. Let me see your... And she's like insistent, like, let me just see your baby for 1 second. So somehow Olympia passes off. She manages to get Olympia to pass off the baby. And then Olympia just goes fucking sprinting at the window, slams into it, slams over it, and just fucking dies. And you're like, holy shit. So then Gary, the the old lady has a pair of scissors, and Gary makes her look, and she takes the scissors and stabs herself, and then Gary takes the scissors from her, and Mallory's hiding under the blanket on the bed with the babies, and he's like, let me see your babies. And then all of a sudden we hear Douglas. Douglas has made it out of the garage. He's got the gun, and he's blindly standing there ready and willing to shoot Gary like a badass man. Talk about character development. Douglas knows it's not safe, and he's up there trying to protect Mallory and her babies. You go, Dad Douglas. But it doesn't really work very well for him. He shoots Gary in the arm, but then Gary tackles him down the staircase, and Gary is the one to recover first, and he's still got the scissors, so he stabs Douglas right in the heart. And I think there's a really cool line here where Gary just genuinely is like, I'm so sorry that you didn't get to see. So we know that these crazy people are not malicious. They really do think that there's some kind of salvation to be had in looking at these creatures. So he stabs Douglas to death and then goes back upstairs, and then there's a scuffle, and Mallory's not sure what the hell is happening, and someone sits on the bed, and it's Tom. He gets under the covers with them, and you kind of just assume, okay, that's how things kind of came to be. So then we get a time skip. It's 5 years later. Mallory's training boy and girl on noises and how to tell and detect where noises are coming from. And she and Tom are basically their parents. They're in the middle of nowhere, but they have to do supply runs. And everything is kind of like, it's kind of sweet and nice. They're cozy here, despite the supply runs and despite crazies being near. Mallory insists that they are, and Tom just kind of takes her word for it, because why would she lie? So, of course, at this point, Tom's like, we need to move. And that's when we get the radio call from the beginning, he's talking to Tom. We get to hear the other part of the conversation. And he's like, do you have kids? And Mallory's like, don't even tell him. Don't you dare. And he's like, no. And he's like, good. And he's like, why? And he's like, because I don't think they'll make it through the rapids. So he gives them instructions, and the next day, Tom and Mallory are discussing it. Tom wants to go. Mallory doesn't. Tom thinks it's promising. Mallory thinks it could be a trap. So that night, Tom's telling the kids stories, and they love it. Mallory hates it. He thinks it gives them hope, but she thinks it gives them false hope. And then they have this conversation about survival versus living. Or survival versus living, rather. Surviving versus living, sorry. That's what they're talking about. You know, the difference between the two. And Tom says they deserve love, they deserve hope, they deserve a mother, which of course really hurts Mallory's feelings. She's like, you know, every decision I make is for those kids. And they get into a big... That's not what they get into. They get into a big argument, and that night Mal's laying down, and Tom apologizes. And then the next day, they go on a supply run as a family, which is super nice. What a wonderful field trip. But of course, crazies happen and ruin everything, just like they do in modern times. You know, you'd be having a good field trip to the zoo, and then the crazies show up, and then you're like, oh my lord, we gotta run. So, Tom bravely sacrifices himself to save Mallory and the kids, but before he does, he's like, Mal, promise to take the kids upriver if I don't make it. Take them up the river. And so she's like, you're gonna make it, like, you know, don't leave me. And he's like, you gotta go. So she and the kids go, and Tom goes full soldier on these motherfuckers, and takes them out. And there's one that notices the kids and Mallory, so he goes rogue, goes to go get the kids and Mallory. Tom runs after that guy, and Tom is not blindfolded anymore. He's been shot already. And it seems to be a critical shot, so he's run after this guy to protect his family, and he sees one of the things, and his eyes change color, but before he does anything crazy, he shoots the guy going after his family, and then he shoots and kills himself. And that's when we loop back to the beginning of the movie, where Mallory's giving them the like sergeant talk, and they're like, where's Tom? And you're like, oh no! So, we're back at the beginning. So now that we have context for all the things that are happening now, we're back to the now. We're on the river. It's been 42 hours. we've got another meeting, again, about the rapids. And this part is the part that made me cry. In my defense, I was a little tipsy. It still gets me pretty good when I'm sober watching it. But Mallory is talking about one of us has to look. I get to decide. And the thing that really made me start to cry is girl bites her bottom lip to keep herself from crying. And I was like, oh no, baby. Like, it just breaks me to see a kid have to do that. Like, and it just hurts. And Mal makes the right call. She's like, no one looks. No one looks. No one's gonna look. We're just gonna go with it. And if we make it, we make it. And I was like, oh, that's so good. That's the right choice. Again, that's the no choice is the best choice, which is often not even a choice in life, but it is the best choice in this case, which usually it's not. So there you go. Have some convoluted life advice thrown in. Of course, going down the rapids, they tip, but Mal collects the children, and they bravely make it through the woods. And they're like, it's so kind of stupid, because like the guy who told them about the place and about going down the river, he's basically like, just follow the sound of the birds. It's the worst way to find anything ever. So they're trying, and then they start hearing voices, and the creatures are whispering to them, using the people they know, telling them to take off their blindfolds and stuff, and it's a really, like, they're here moment. Mallory trips and falls down this little slope, and she gets knocked out for a second, and the kids are confused by the voices, so they wander off. This is the part where Mallory finally reaches deep down into herself and allows her heart to just show forth. And she's begging them not to take her kids. She finds Boy first, and he says that she's calling out for Girl with Boy in her arms, and Boy's like, she's scared of you, Mallory. So then she just starts apologizing profusely and beautifully as well. She's like, I'm so sorry about this. I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry. I was so hard on you. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And finally, Girl comes to find her, and she is just, like, thrilled. Everyone's thrilled. Everybody applaud. We're not out of the woods yet, but still, it's an applause moment. So they follow the birds again, but the creatures come back, so they're running after the birds, hoping that they keep making noise. She finds a door, finally, and begs whoever is there, she's banging on the door, and she's like, open up, open up. And when there's no response, she's like, please, just take my children. Just take the children. Keep my children safe. So the door opens, and they take all three of them in, and they're checking their eyes, and they're like, she's good. And it turns out they found themselves at a school for the blind. Haha. So, this guy, the guy on the radio, I think his name's Rick, he introduces himself and shows them to this atrium that has like a canopy of vines and leaves and flowers, and the birds are singing, and it's just a really beautiful place, to be honest. And they're there, and she sees her OBGYN. Like, first they let their birds out of the box to go join the other birds. And it's a really nice moment. And then she notices her OBGYN is there. And she's like, what are their names? These kids, And she's like, these are my kids. And she's the kids introduce themselves as Boy and Girl. And she's like, actually, your name is Olympia, after the sweetest woman I know. And your name is Tom, after the bravest man I know. And the kids are like, can we go play? And she's like, yes. And we get a ooh-woo moment. It's very sweet and a very good ending, despite the fact that basically no one survives. But Girl makes it, and so does Boy, and those are the important things. Also, Mallory learns how to love openly, and that's the important thing as well. The birds also get out of the box, so that's a really good thing. And yeah, that's the end of the movie. Very hopeful ending, very nice ending. I really did enjoy this movie. Like I said, it doesn't really waste your time. It's a long movie, but it doesn't feel long because none of the moments are wasted. Like, you don't get excessive amounts of, like, characters walking or whatever. Like, just dumb stuff. It just kind of gets down in the nitty gritty, and once it starts hitting, it doesn't stop. And it pretty much hits from the beginning. But yeah, that was Bird Box. Let me know what you guys thought. Let me know if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it. Let me know if you've got a request for a next movie. I think I will be doing the Poughkeepsie tapes. Sophomore John over on Rumble, a friend of mine, he reminded me that the Poughkeepsie tapes exist, and I have it on DVD. It's been a hot second since I've watched it, so I'll have to go through it again. But he reminded me right before I started house sitting, which I've been doing for like 2 weeks now. And I was like, maybe watching a movie about a serial killer who breaks into houses and kills people is not a good thing to do while I'm watching houses and being alone. So, I mean, not that I get scared easily, but at the same time, I don't want to accidentally like stab the UPS guy, you know? Anyway, let me know what you thought. Thank you for listening. Check out Sophomore John's channel. He and I have been doing some collabs together, and it's just a really good time. You can catch me in the chat a lot of the time, even if I'm not on the stream itself. Give him a follow, give him a like. He's a great guy. We've got a ton of people over on Rumble who are just wonderful, so check us out there. And come party with us. This has been the Beware the Moon podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay safe. Watch out for evil creatures that make you see sad things and want to kill yourself. Keep the birds close. Be good to burbs. And as always, beware the moon.